All right, so your very first placement is on their way. What should you expect? Hello, my name is Lauren, and this channel is called Lauren Fosters, where we talk about all things foster care and adoption related. I am a mom of 10 awesome kids. 6 are adopted from the foster care system. I'm also a military spouse, so we've moved around quite a lot, so I sprinkle that info in here and there. And I'm also former foster youth, so I aged out of the foster care system when I was 18, 19, I don't know, whenever I graduated my senior year, and I am not doing that math right now. So all my videos are from the perspective of not only me having gone through the system, but also some of my kiddos having gone through the system and what our experience was like. I recently made a video where I talked about when you get that first call and they call you and ask if you want a certain placement and what that might look like for you as a foster parent and what questions to ask and that kind of thing. So what happens when they show up? Like they have child in hand and they show up to your home. One of the things I mentioned in the other video is sometimes those placements are going to be automatic, like they're going to call you and they're going to be like on your doorstep a moment later with the child. And but there's also the potential that this could be a planned out placement. So they could say, hey, we're removing this child from uncle on Thursday because uncle has said he can no longer care for the child. I'm saying this from personal experience because this is actually a scenario we had. And we will bring the child then with their belongings at this time. So it could be right away, this could be a right away situation, and this could be a planned out situation. So depending on which one of those things are true in your particular situation is how ready you will or won't be, if that makes sense. Ahead of time, before they even call you, they're gonna have you have some parameters. So they're gonna say, you know, maybe you're an all teen girl home, maybe you're an all teen boy home, maybe you're infants only, maybe you do special needs, those kind of things. So you should already have your home set up by the time you're licensed for whatever those parameters are. So assuming they called you and this placement is within those parameters, you should already have the bed and those kind of things set up. What you may not have already ready, maybe clothes or certain food items that this child likes or requires. I don't hear as often as I think what is represented that there's this kind of like shock factor and you have to run out and buy all these things. I don't know that that's been our story, and I'm sure it happens, and feel free to comment below if that has been your story where you've just been surprised and had to run to Walmart or Target real quick to buy some items for your child. That has not been our case. Our agencies have in 3 different states, and having been licensed different times even within the same state, we have not had it to where we've had to like rush out and get things. Like if we have been licensed for infants to toddlers, which we actually hasn't been our story, but we've just always had diapers on hand. So like if you were that kind of home, you would have those things handy, you would have bottles handy. And some of these children, when they're removed with several of their belongings. So we've had children show up with next to nothing, with just the clothes on their back, and we've also had children show up with bags and bags of stuff, including bottles and diapers and that kind of thing, to at least get you to the next day so that you could go shopping if you need to the next day. As a foster parent, I've always tried to have at least a few clothing items on hand for the specific age group I'm licensed for or that I've agreed to my agency to take. So I may already have a couple of toddler girl outfits or early elementary school age boy outfits handy so that I can make sure that those children do have something. In your area, you may even have a local lending closet. And if you've already kind of gotten ingrained in your foster care and adoption community, which I would heavily recommend doing, like while you're getting licensed, like do not wait till you're a foster parent to start looking for support groups, because you are going to need them and they are going to need you at some point. But look and see if your area has a local lending closet so you can make sure you have some of those things on hand ahead of time. I'm not saying that those situations don't happen where you have to rush out. They give you a call and they say, oh, we're bringing over a 3-year-old boy, and now you've got to rush out and do stuff. But generally speaking, your agency, assuming they're a great agency and they've got you set up for success, will make sure you have those things ahead of time. And I don't mean like they'll buy them for you, but they'll usually kind of require you to have those things before they even start making those calls. I would also recommend having like snacks and fun drinks on hand, and I don't mean like soda pop and like getting them all hyped up at 3 a.m., but you know, because that might be when you're getting your call. But I mean like, you know, have some juice on hand, have some fish crackers on hand, have some sort of snack on hand, because it's interesting to see kids when they're kind of going through it, to just have this like common ground of like familiarity. And I know that sounds weird, you know, because I don't want to assume like every kid has access to all things before they come to you, but I mean, you know, most kids have had a fishy cracker, so for them to just sit there and eat that little fishy cracker, it almost is like this kind of like, okay, this is, you know, I can deal with this, you know. It kind of takes them away from what is happening around them, which is utter chaos. So having food and snacks handy is super helpful. If you're taking teenagers, especially teen girls, making sure you have feminine hygiene products available, making sure you have, I would say this with all boys, all girls, no matter what age you're taking, making sure you have undergarments available, because that may be not something that they have handy, or maybe not have plenty of. We were always very playful within the first few minutes. Now, I've had the benefit of being part of a couple, so like me and my husband, because what's going to happen is they're going to come to your home to fill out the paperwork for this placement. A lot of times they'll give you maybe a little bit of detail on the placement. They might show you court documents, they might not. They might show you some background information in paperwork, they might not. They may just verbally tell you what they know so thus far of what is going on with their case or this child, and they're going to have you sign some paperwork to make the whole thing official. So being part of a couple, one of us has always been the paperwork person. That's usually me, because I usually have the most questions and I want to ask all the questions I can to the caseworker. My husband's been the one that has played with the new placement. So for one of our kiddos, one of my memories was, you know, him just walk into the room and she was very kind of indifferent. She almost seemed like she was in shock, because she didn't seem sad, but she didn't seem happy. She just was so blank faced. And for some reason, when he walked in the room, she just lit up, and she was just a toddler at the time. And he basically just sat on the floor with her, and she kind of, you know, she kind of did at some point start crying and like letting some feelings out and releasing whatever was going on inside of her. But, you know, he just kind of played with her and tried to make her feel as welcome as possible. So if you're part of a couple set, I would have one that's really just off to the side interacting with the child. The caseworker's not going to expect both of you to be locked into what they're saying. So maybe have one parent be the information gatherer and the paper signer, and have one parent be the person who's playing with the baby or the kid, or hanging out with the teen. I realize that there's a lot of single foster parents out there. That's just gonna make signing that paperwork trickier. Hopefully they walk you through that process quickly. Now, as far as them giving you details, it may be something where you either have to go off to the side to have a conversation, but I would heavily recommend saying, if it's not something you've already talked about on the phone, asking all those questions. Hey, why was this child removed? If you can give me that information, or why are they being placed somewhere else? If that's not some information you've gotten ahead of time, that's a hard conversation to have in front of an older kid or a teenager or any listening ears, because I don't think it's fair. I mean, this is just my own personal opinion, you know, take this with a grain of salt. I don't think it's fair to have that conversation in front of that child. So if it's an older child, I would say, I don't even know if I would say go off to the side and have that conversation, unless there's something you just really need to like get off your chest and ask real quick before they go. Otherwise, I would say, hey, I'm going to be in contact with you later, like maybe after bedtime, and then we need to have a conversation. Now, with that said, you're going to need to sign paperwork, which means you need to be already knowledgeable about what's going on before you sign that paperwork. So I can't stress enough that maybe you ask these questions before the child's been placed. All that to say, you know, ask away, but just realize listening ears are there, and you don't want to hurt feelings. And this is, once again, where it's so helpful if you've got someone else, maybe even another foster parent that has an extra set of hands that can come over and hang out with you while all this is happening, that can entertain a kid or hang out with a kid while you're asking the questions you need to ask. So don't be afraid to tag team the situation. One more little piece of advice, and then I'm going to get into kind of a heavier topic on this, and I really hope you stay with me to that point, because I think it's almost the most important part of the video. But one more little piece of house cleaning, or just my own 2 cents, just from personal experience. Don't be in such a hurry to get them ingrained and embedded into what's going on in your house. Like, they're not going to know the food you eat. They're not going to know the systems you have. They're not going to know, you know, what your schedules are like at home, and who does what chore. They're not going to know the system. So like, give it a minute. Like, let them decompress. Let them have their time. Like, maybe day 2 isn't the time to break out the chore chart and like write their name in. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give them a minute. They could have just had their whole world ripped away, and maybe even all their school friends, if they're being told to go to a different school, or now they're in a different county or a different town. A lot has just changed for them. Like, give them a minute to decompress. You may have, you know, gotten them a cute pillowcase. They may not care. I mean, by all means, show it to them, and hopefully they will delight in it. But don't be surprised if they're a little withdrawn and they don't want to jump into your world right away. A great example of that is if your child does come with a lot of clothes. Now, if your child is like an infant, they may not notice if you take those clothes and wash them while they're, sleeping at night or whatever, because you're going to probably want to do that. When the children come in, you're going to want to wash things that can be washed, okay? Heavily recommend that. With that said, an older child may struggle with that. And it doesn't seem like something maybe kids would care about, but taking any kind of lovey, bottle, favorite cup, their bag, literally anything they brought with them. An old hat might be important. Just see all these things that may not be important to you and that you might want to remove to wash or clean or whatever. Those things might be the world to this child in that moment. So giving them some power over, like, hey, can we do this together? Like, can we wash your stuff together? Would it be okay if I do this? And you can say no, but we do need to clean this at some point. Can we clean this up? Can we do this together? I had a kid that didn't want to unpack for months after moving in with us, months. So we had to get creative and buy bins that looked a little nicer than cardboard boxes. And but they may not be ready to jump into your world yet, okay? And their stuff could be their world. So just think about that. I know, like, we want to rush and get everything clean and yeah, they're part of our family now and all this stuff. Give them a minute, because in their mind, they're not part of your family yet. They just got there. This is where I want to get to probably the most important part of this video. You are not their rescuer. I don't know who needs to hear that. I think I needed to hear that as a new foster parent. As someone who is former foster youth, I should have known better from my own story, from my own perspective, having watched tons of foster brothers come through my home while I was there. I was, just a little background about me, I was an only girl in an all-boy foster home for most of my junior high and high school time before I aged out. And long story, I'll have to share sometime why I was allowed to be there, part of a siblings, that's a whole thing. But anyway, I should have known from my own story that these kids were going to walk in and be devastated and not feel relieved. But truth be told, in my story, I was a little relieved. The scenario I was in, for me, made me want to be in foster care, made me want anything but where I was, okay? But I will say that I have yet to meet a kid that wanted to be removed from where they were removed from, whether that be another foster home or even if it was a foster home that was hard for them, or from their biological or birth parents, regardless of how potentially abusive that scenario was. So if you're getting into foster care because you feel like these kids are going to come in and think that you're some sort of savior, that you have protected them from evil, and they're going to come in and just be so grateful and happy to see you, I need to tell you that you are wrong. Chances are, before these children or this child has been placed in your home, they have had one of the most devastating days or nights of their lives. One of my children in particular can tell you, and he was removed around 4 years old, he can tell you everything he smelled, everything he tasted, everything he saw that day he was removed. He can tell you everything. He can tell you what he was feeling. He remembers every single detail, and all of it boils down to how terrified he was and how much he didn't understand why he was being removed. All that to say, if you think that he felt lucky to be in the scenario he was in, or if he felt like relieved, you'd be incredibly wrong. Still to this day, that trauma haunts him, and that trauma is something he's working through in therapy, was just the initial removal itself. I have also had kids that have been taken from other foster homes, whether that be that the foster home closed down or just could not support that particular child any longer, and those hurt as well. Those cause wounds, those moments cause scars, and those are difficult things to get over. And a lot of times I've noticed when kids are removed from other foster homes and then placed in your home, there kind of is this attitude of they don't trust you from the get-go because they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So don't be surprised if they walk in your home and maybe you're foster home number 3 and they're like, here we go again, another foster parent that's just going to drop me when I'm inconvenient or do something naughty again. Our very first placement, I think I stayed on that couch with those girls all night. They just sobbed and sobbed, and I held them and I held them, and we watched cartoons, and that's what I did. I knew I was going to be a wreck the next day, but that's what needed to happen. I didn't force them into a bed that they were too scared to be in. I sat there and we just kind of cried together, and that very much could be your reality too. The first day can be really, really hard for most of these kids. They don't usually just hop right into it and act like nothing even happened, but some do. Some have hop from home to home, and to them it's another adventure. I have a kiddo like that in my house who, when he was placed with us, it was like, just here we go again. And that's kind of depressing to me. I'm like, oh, you shouldn't ever feel that way, like here we go again. But that's how he felt, and he was just like, oh, here we go, another fun adventure. And even to this day, when you ask him like, man, what was that like living in so many homes, he'll just be like, it was fun. I loved getting to know people, and we got to have so many adventures. And I'm sure there's more behind that as far as like how that really affected him. But I mean, he's an optimistic guy, and he found some sort of weird joy in it, and so he kind of just jumped right in our home as well. But anyway, I know this was a lot of information, especially to throw at you if you're looking into fostering, and maybe once again you're just going through the licensing process and you're like, what is the first call going to be like? And then you laid all this heavy stuff on me, Lauren. I apologize, but it's true. And you do need to know that when you go into this world of foster care, and you're going to hear things like, well, you're such a blessing to these kids and they're so lucky to have you. They're not going to feel lucky to have you, most likely, at least not in the beginning, maybe ever. The why of why they're coming into your home is really, really hard. And so just prepare your hearts and your minds for that. Have the things ready that need to be ready for whatever, once again, you've decided with your agency that you're willing to take. Anyway, I hope that helps. Please like, please subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. All right, bye.